you know, what is so just to sort of paint a very high level picture for everyone who
Mhm.
have heard of Bitcoin but don't necessarily know exactly what it is. And can you sort of explain what is what is Bitcoin from a 1,000 foot level, and then we
Mhm.
can sort of take it down from there. But I really
Okay.
want people to understand why Bitcoin is is such the craze right now, and we can talk about other altcoins down later on. But just Bitcoin as sort of the OG, the main currency, the cryptocurrency that has sort of took off.
Mhm.
What is that in a nutshell?
Okay, and just from 1,000 feet up, first of all, I am somebody who believes that, from my own thinking, that there will be one cryptocurrency that will dominate. Now, it could be that Bitcoin is superseded by something else in the future, and during the early years, I think there's a higher probability of that. As time goes on, I think there's a lower probability of that. So just from the onset, I'm someone who believes that there will be, one cryptocurrency that will dominate, and I see that as Bitcoin. And it's proven itself for quite a long time now, and so I'm you know I'm you know that's what I'm supporting. Although I am interested in looking at other things, like I was interested in Mimblewimble. We won't go into all that detail, but there are other cryptocurrencies that could supersede it and have better quality. So you always want to be aware of that. Bitcoin could go to zero. I want to tell everybody, Bitcoin could go to zero. So just always, if you're ever going to get involved, I tell my family and friends, just put in if you're going to support it, just expect to lose it all. So
Right.
just to
Mhm.
start with, okay. Um, but that's not my belief. Okay, so with Bitcoin, we have something that is really, it's not a physical commodity. It's just ones and zeros. So how does that work? All sorts of people have qualms about that. They want to have something behind it, gold or something, and again, in gold, I mean, gold fits into my theories and stuff like that. There's reasons why gold was used as a money. But, again, technology does change things as time goes on. And I think Bitcoin is something that is changing things as time goes on, but the qualities of a money, fairly classic. You can look back at history and sort of understand sort of what makes for a good money and think about it mathematically and figure out what makes for a good money. There are all sorts of different ways you can sort of get a perspective on this, but the point is that technology does move on, and there are these things that arise, just like Bitcoin has arisen, which maybe fit the bill. So what Bitcoin is just to sort of give a very very simple vision of it. It's an open source software. That means anyone can work on it and anyone can contribute to it. You can, if you don't like the way that it's going, you can modify it and have your own version of Bitcoin if you want. But basically, no one will follow you. You'll just be on your own. But there's sort of a mainstream Bitcoin, but it has forked at times. There was a big fork a couple of years ago, which got a lot. There's a lot of commotion about. But there's been sort of this main core Bitcoin core that has been the main line of this open source software. So all it is this open source software that's up in Git somewhere, right? So on GitHub, and so it's software. That's all it is. And what it allows for is peer-to-peer cooperation, where you're running this software on various machines, and somehow you are able to have this idea of something called the Bitcoin, and it's divisible into. It's not like you have to buy one Bitcoin. You can actually buy what's called a Satoshi, I think, which is 10 to the minus eighth, if I've got that right, of a Bitcoin. It's very small. And so you have this ability to generate, and there's a cap to them. There's going to be only 21 million. There's sort of an asymptotic. As time goes on, there are more and more bitcoins that are brought into the system, but it's an asymptotic thing. So it's scheduled not to go above 21 million total. Okay, so that's sort of at least for the layperson, that's really all you kind of need to know. For someone who's more technically inclined, there is this idea that, and this sort of ties in with something I was working on in 1997, 1999. I was working on a little project of my own, to implement some payment for a timestamping service that somebody else had, and I sort of offered to try to help with that using my newfound Java skills and little Perl. And I think timestamping then really all it consisted of was this hash, which whatever you're timestamping, you've got some text or something, a bunch of ones and zeros, whatever a file, and you're creating a hash from it. Now, hash is a one-way function. It's hard, it's easy to go one way, but it's hard to go the other. So when you generate a hash from a file, you're just sort of in a way characterizing that file. If someone sees the hash, you can say this file, verify this file goes with this hash. Now, if you put these hashes in a structure where they sort of build upon one another, and one hash will not only depend on the file, but also depend on the hash before it. You can have this chain of hashes, which is what the timestamping service was umpteen years ago. And you can periodically publish, say, in the New York Times or some, publication of record. This is sort of the thinking back then. I mean, now it's changed, but then the thinking was you periodically publish, and so you could have a timestamping service that would basically allow you to establish when documents existed. Say you wanted to prove that you had an idea at such and such a year, you could do it through this timestamping service. So that's sort of actually the root. A lot of sort of the root of Bitcoin is this timestamping service of all things, and so Bitcoin kind of basically has this notion of having hashes and generating them and putting them into and what they do is they sort of are trying to keep track of transactions. So when you move Bitcoin from person A to person B, that's sort of what you're going to be in a sense hashing is that record of you're moving the Bitcoin from one person to the other. And so they have a structure which is a little more complex than just a simple sort of line of hashes that I was just describing. What they do is they bunch them into these blocks, and so you have a block of these transactions, and there's a limitation to the size of the block, and on the average every 10 minutes, people who are working on verifying these blocks to make sure they're actually valid, there's no double spending, things like this. There are people who are working on that, and they solve this little mathematical problem that takes computing CPU computing time. And so it's not cheap. And whoever comes up with the answer first gets to be the one defining the next block. And so every 10 minutes, a new block is put on average. A new block is put along, on this blockchain now, rather than a hash chain. It's a blockchain. And there's some, details with regard to all that when, I won't go into now. But basically, that's the idea is that there's some way to make sure that we have sort of solidified in like those mosquitoes in amber. They find you you want to somehow have those transactions in amber and stuck there so you can see them and make sure they're there, and you just sort of have this record, almost like a geological record of all these transactions that are accumulating, and you can say, okay, yes, this transaction happened back 5 years ago, and and you can sort of track all these Bitcoins the way they're moving around, and it's a little more sophisticated, which is kind of neat. Bitcoin can not only move money from person A to person B, but you can have, like, for example, these transactions where the Bitcoin will move into a state from which you need the okay of 2 of 3 people to move it to the next state. And so you can imagine all sorts of interesting things you can do with escrow and things like this. So there's a scripting language within Bitcoin, which is very simple because you don't want to have any. You want to keep your vulnerability, your security, your vulnerability, cross-section, whatever, kind of limited. So it's a very simple scripting language, but it does have some power.